Hi, good evening, brethren. Welcome. So today's message, I think, is going to be very interesting because I've never taught about this topic before, and I don't think that the ministry has either. And if the ministry has, if pastor has talked about it, I'm not aware of a message. But this message, as we all know, we are at that time of year where we are upon Halloween. And it's a very interesting holiday, in my opinion, because I think that it's very clear that it is a witch's holiday. However, there are a lot of Christians who celebrate Halloween who aren't aware of the pagan roots of it, the very demonic root of it, and the dangers of celebrating Halloween in the form that we know in our culture to celebrate Halloween. And what is that? That is dressing up in costumes, taking your kids out, trick or treating. You go and you knock on people's doors and you get candy. People go to Halloween parties where you dress up and you drink and you just fellowship together. But even in those little areas, the root of it comes from a Celtic tradition, which I'm going to talk about today. But another thing that people do is they carve pumpkins. I haven't celebrated Halloween since I was a kid, so to be honest, sometimes I forget about the little things that people do, but I know that it's also attributed with certain things that you do in the fall. You eat corn, bob for apples, those kinds of things. I haven't done much for Halloween. Actually, even I stopped celebrating Halloween when I was a kid, but it wasn't really for any religious reason. It was for the fact that I think my dad at the time, must have been sixth grade. He's like, okay, well, you're in middle school. You're not in elementary school. You're not kids anymore. So we're not doing Halloween. If he just made it seem like, okay, Halloween's for kids. You're not a kid anymore. That's that. If there was a religious reason behind it, he didn't explain it to us at the time. But knowing what I know now, there was a lot of wisdom in that decision because children dressing up in costumes and going trick-or-treating is actually an open door for demons and spirits who are at this time in the tradition, the Celtic tradition called Samhain. There is an opening. This is the time of year where the veil between the spirit world and this physical world is very thin, so you can cross over. And that is, spirits can cross over to this world a lot easier than they can at other times of the year because the veil is thinner. So this is an ideal time to also talk to the dead. So those spirits that are coming from the spirit world, from beyond the veil, you could say, they're looking for things to do here. They're looking for people to possess here and seeds to plant here. And where they plant those seeds is in people, in their minds. So when you're out celebrating, and participation is celebration, even if you're not fully aware of what you're actually celebrating, when you're walking around and participating in it, you are an open door for something to get inside of you. And hold on. So you're an open door, and the only way that a spirit can really get inside your house is if you allow it, and if you open yourself up to it and you allow it to come in. It can't just come barging in without permission. It needs an open door, and that is an open door today. So that's how we celebrate in this culture Halloween today. And a lot of Christians are aware that it is a very demonic holiday. It's the witches' playground. It is their New Year. It's their high holy, in Satanism, it's their high holy holiday. They do a lot of sacrifices on this day. They do a lot of divination on this day. A lot of rituals, different rituals. And I'm going to kind of go into the difference between paganism, Wiccanism, occultists, Satanists. There's a lot of subtle differences in these terms. And if I use them interchangeably, Please don't get upset if you're someone who's watching this, because I don't know where this message is going. If you're somebody who's watching this, I know that there is a difference, but I may use them interchangeably. Please don't be offended by it. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. I know there are differences. I know paganism is an umbrella. Wiccanism falls under paganism. And Satanism and the occult, being an occultist doesn't necessarily make you a Satanist, even though the root of all of these spiritual practices is what, as a Christian, we would call pagan practices. But in the actual religions and rituals and practices themselves, they do make a distinction among themselves. So understanding what Halloween is as a Christian, a lot of Christians know that it's a very demonic holiday and don't participate in it. However, Halloween has been repackaged and given to the church as an alternative in the form of a fall festival, which is very, very interesting. And it seems very innocent. So first, let's go back to some of the roots of Halloween, which people may not be aware of. I put a couple of references in the description of the video. One was a video by Chuck Missler, actually, which I found very interesting. He did a lot of research on Halloween and the roots of it. So if you're interested, please check that video out. But I just want to state for the record that I do not agree with some of the things he said at the very end of the video about reincarnation. And he also mentioned an alternative to Halloween that Christians can celebrate is a fall festival, which I disagree with and which I'll get to later on. But so he said those two things. I don't agree with that. A couple things that he said, fall festival and reincarnation, but the information that he gave about Halloween, he did give a lot of good information that if anybody's interested, please check that out. And then I put a couple articles up. One was from the History Channel, just giving like a brief history summary of where Halloween came from, the roots of it. And then also another article from the Insider just about the traditions and the dark history behind Halloween, which is even more chilling than you realized. So where did this holiday start? This holiday started, it's a Celtic tradition from Ireland. And actually on the Tourism Ireland website, which I look at, they sent me an ad on Instagram and they were very loud and proud about the fact that Ireland is the home of Halloween. It's a Druid Celtic festival called Samhain. And the Druids, the Celtic pagan traditions, were very nature-based, you could say, worshiping trees, the seasons. I know a lot of traditions around the world practice that, but primarily in Ireland and Scotland, this is where Samhain, I'm trying to think of like an example in movies of a druid, like druid sites, you know, when they have the cloaks and they're all in a circle and they're very nature-based, which is Wiccan today, I would say. Where Wiccan came from is largely a nature-based spiritual practice. They have their pantheon of their deities in the flowers and the trees and things like that. If you want to read more about it, it's certainly on the website. I am no expert in Wiccan or Samhain rituals, so I can only explain that. I'm only going to explain a little bit of it, but the base of it is Samhain, which is, if I'm reading one of my websites, just a little bit of information here. The ancient Celts were an assortment of tribes and small kingdoms that were scattered around Western and Central Europe. And they were conquered by the Romans, but the Celts did continue to survive. So Samhain, the Celtic festival, it's an ancestor of Halloween, and it was their way of looking at the world. All the Celtic peoples conceived of a fundamental dichotomy between light and dark, with the former representing positive, lucky, fruitful values, and the latter representing negative, threatening, destructive values. And so the Celtic year began at sundown at the end of the autumn harvest. So this is why Halloween, Samhain, is their new year, is because it starts the new year. You end your harvest and all of the light, and you go into a time of darkness, into winter. And so their two big holidays divided the year. Beltane, which takes place in late April, early May on our calendar, and Samhain, which occurs from October 31st to November 1st. And it's the moment when the spiritual world became visible to humans and the gods enjoyed playing tricks on mortals. It was also a time when the spirits of the dead mingled with the living. So the Celts believed in gathering all their harvests by Samhain so that it would not be damaged by the evil or mischievous spirits who would return on the first evening of that dark half of the year. Token offerings of the harvested food should be offered to the spirits to placate them. And so the importance of these pre-Christian customs were not lost on the Catholic Church, as we know, as they moved out from, and conquered, as Rome conquered other nations, other lands, in those pre-Christian customs. They were really absorbed into the Catholic traditions at the time. So the people didn't have to give up their traditions. They just changed names and changed dates. But the fundamental root of the reason why they celebrated that holiday, was kept to them. They could keep that. They just needed to say that they were Catholic or come to church or give money to the church. They really could keep a lot of the stuff that they did that they didn't want to give up, because the Catholic Church knew that they wouldn't give that up. So why force somebody to give it up when you can just incorporate it into the Catholic Church? So it was eventually converted and given a Christian context. And since the ancient Celts believed that all sorts of evil spirits were out and about on Samhain, the early medieval Christian church believed in saints and Christians who were remarkable for their devout religious beliefs and lives. But saints also had a supernatural side, such as their involvement in miraculous occurrences. So the church designated November 1st as All Saints' Day, so that they would remember the dead that they lost. And I think, not the dead that they lost, I think it was the dead saints, if I'm not mistaken. All Saints' Day. I know it was, the first evidence date of celebration and the broadening of the festival to include all saints as well as martyrs. So you honored the saints and the martyrs. But also Dia de los Muertos is also around this time as well. So in Mexico, when the Catholic Church moved across the Atlantic and started conquering, in those countries that practiced Catholicism, conquered those areas, the Spanish, they just incorporated those traditions and they created Dia de los Muertos, which is a time where you remember the dead, your dead ancestors, and you pray to them. And it's technically a joyous holiday because you're remembering them, and there's, you paint skeletons on your face, and it's very lively holiday. But at the end of the day, you're practicing ancestor worship. You're praying to the dead. You're focused on the dead. And just because you wrap it up in color doesn't make it any different. So what else do we have here? Oh, back to... But the old beliefs associated with Samhain never really died out, because they were too strongly rooted in the people, and they wouldn't really convert to just the day where you're remembering the saints. So the Catholic Church never really fully rooted out those qualities, those customs. They incorporated a little bit of them, but Samhain still lives on in the name of Halloween as we know it today. And Samhain still lives on through these fall festivals that churches are celebrating, because Christians, instead of not celebrating Halloween, they still want to celebrate Halloween and they still want people to come to their church. So they just renamed it, and they just got away with getting rid of some of the obvious demonic aspects of it, like dressing up in costumes. And a lot of the costumes out there, some of them aren't bad costumes, but the primary costumes, people dress up as devils, they dress up as witches and ghosts, and it's a spooky holiday. It's a time when you watch horror movies and you become frightened, and there's very occultic roots to it. You get into all the spooky things, all of the creepy things, ghouls, goblins, everything that you typically don't, I shouldn't say you typically don't do, because we live in a very secular world today, but back in that time, maybe like 100 years ago, when people were more Christian, the American culture was more Christianized, they still had one night of mischievous devilry that they were allowed to do to get it all out of their system, and then they could go back being their typical Christian self the rest of the week. But the rituals adopted were the pumpkin carving and carving pumpkins, putting lights in them. It was to ward off evil spirits, which a lot of people do pumpkin carving today, but I don't think they understand and they recognize where it actually came from, the real purpose of it. It's not to decorate your house, it's to ward off evil spirits. Okay, so that some of that information was from the article that I got from the History Channel. I thought that was very interesting. Another interesting fact that I found out was the bobbing for apples is actually a practice of divination. I had no idea. But the practice of divination, the thing about it is that women would like mark an apple, and then the men would bob for the apple, and that was how they were supposed to find their husband. So I didn't know that. I thought that was really interesting. So some of this other article that I found, the morbid traditions, goes all the way back. The bobbing for apples is a form of divination. Jack-o'-lanterns, it symbolizes a fateful deal with the devil. There's a whole myth about an Irish folklore figure called Jack-o'-lantern. He tried to trick the devil into climbing a tree, and I guess he trapped him in the tree, and in order to get down, he made a deal with him saying that, he'll let him down. Jack will let Satan down if he vows that the devil will never come after his soul. So the devil agreed to it, but he apparently was a conniving local drunkard. So when he died, he was rejected at the gates of heaven. And then he went back to the devil, and the devil rejected him because of the deal that he made. So when he died, he wasn't allowed into heaven. So he's just like doomed to wander until he can find an eternal resting place. So that is where the jack-o'-lantern comes in. So the jack-o'-lantern is supposed to ward off evil spirits. It's supposed to ward off apparently this jack. The candy aspect of it didn't come in till later, but what I find very interesting is that parents, since their child's young, teach their children not to accept candy from strangers. That if a stranger comes up to you and says, "I have candy, come with me in the van, you'll get candy," the child is trained to say, "No, I don't want it. I can't accept candy from strangers." They're taught to not to speak to strangers, but yet the one day out of the entire year, not only do they go to all these strangers' houses, but they're accepting candy and food from these people that they don't even know. So you never know whose house you're at. You don't know if they're praying anything over the candy that your child is taking. It's the complete opposite of what our society, we try to train our children not to do, but then we allow them to do it the one time of the year on a holiday when they're dressed up as witches and ghosts and goblins. And most of them, even if it's not something like that particular, there's all the masks are very scary. The holiday is meant to frighten you and to bring out the demonic aspects of our culture. Ouija boards are used more prevalently around this time. Of course, people party. A lot of alcohol is consumed, which is wine and spirits. So you're opening up yourself even more on that day. And the decorations are completely out of control, in my opinion. It's come October 1st, you start seeing skeletons scaling the side of a house, which is crazy to me why you would start. It's like one of the biggest holidays behind Christmas. So a lot of Christians are aware of this and they don't celebrate Halloween. They can see the demonic aspects of it. And I don't know if anybody's heard about John Ramirez, but he's a former Satanist. But now he's an evangelist. He has a very powerful testimony, but I know there are certainly a couple of videos on YouTube about him detailing how dangerous Halloween is for children, and that really witches are very happy that Christians let their children celebrate the devil one day of the year. And they practice, it's something like so simple. Like you think that it's so light and fluffy that, oh, my child's dressing up. It's so exciting. You go out, you get trick-or-treating, you get candy, but you don't realize that you're an open door for something that's flying around and that can get inside of your kid, that can get inside of you and your kid. And it's like the tarot cards, that it just seems like fun. It seems like innocent fun. But at the end of the day, it's the innocent fun that gets you into the most trouble, because it's not obviously malevolent. You can't see the evil up front. It hides it in fun, in playtime, in a carnal activity that brings you a little bit of joy. So instead, the Christians who understand this principle and have been convicted by this have instead been given an alternative of doing a fall festival instead. So why is this not an acceptable alternative? In my opinion, because you're still celebrating Halloween, you're just taking out the costume aspect of it. You're taking out the trick-or-treating. But actually, even Christians who don't celebrate Halloween in the traditional way, they still go to costume parties. And I know that. And I know churches put on, I think one of the local churches that we went to, that we go to a lot, actually had some sort of costume party a couple weeks ago, but it was a little farther removed from Halloween. But just because you remove it 2 weeks from the date of Halloween doesn't mean that you're completely ignoring the holiday and that you're not in celebration of it. So I had to drop something off to a friend actually this past weekend. And this is how I ended up at a fall festival. And I don't go to fall festivals. I just went there to give her something that I needed to give her, that I owed her for something else that we did, but that's regardless. So I was there and I was like, oh, I don't really want to go to I don't even want to show up at a fall festival, but I need to give her this. And I know that she's telling me that she's, I was praying for a way. I'm like, Lord, please help me give her the money that I needed to give her for this event that we did the other week, because she lives in Northport and I had to give her cash. So she told me, yeah, if you want to come, there's a fall festival at, this local church and whatever. I'll be there volunteering. So I'm like, okay, great. She's going to be in the area. That's awesome. However, I don't want to go to a fall festival. So I just went to go give her what I owed her, and then I left. But while I was there, it was very interesting. And what led me to talk about this message is that stuff that they did there. They did pumpkin painting. They had food there, corn. It was very harvest, fall, decorative. There was a scarecrow there. Stuff for the kids to do, which is great. It was packed. It was great for everyone because it was packed. The church was packed, way more packed than you would get on a Sunday when you're actually going to church, because I'm sure the fall festival in itself drove a lot of people there who don't ever go to that church, but who want to go and do something fun for their kids. So it's great from their point of view that, they're opening up their church. So many more people are going to come, and they're thinking of it in an evangelistic point of view, that this is a great way to come to the community and be a part of the community, so they don't have to give up all their traditions. Like we can still have fun being a Christian without celebrating Halloween in the traditional way, which is exactly what the Catholic Church did to Samhain in the beginning. Is that, okay, well, we're going to make an All Saints Day. We're going to allow you to keep some traditions. We're just going to change some names and kind of merge them a little bit. But, you just repackage it a little bit, and then you repackage it a little bit more. And then as the years go and the generations come and go, you repackage it in different wrapping paper again. But no matter how many times you repackage it, the real purpose, the real root of it, the spirit behind it is still there and operating. And as we all know, Satan is a master deceptor. And of course, if she can't get you one way, she's going to get you another way. So if she doesn't get you in the obvious devilish, ghoulish fashion, if you're not drawn to that, I'm not drawn to that. I'm not drawn to horror films. Somebody is not going to tempt me with a horror film. But I like other things. So Satan can use other things to try to tempt me based on my personality. So if you're not drawn to the spooky supernatural, and you're like, okay, has to do with witchcraft and divination, I'm going to stay away from that and stay away from that for my children. But I'm going to go to the Harvest Fall Festival, which just takes out those ghoulish activities. But you're still celebrating the season, actually, because in Christianity, as being in Israel, you don't celebrate the seasons. Celebration of the seasons of nature, that's paganism. We don't celebrate the coming or the ending of fall or the coming and the going of winter. I know a lot of people are very excited about the going of winter, but we don't celebrate it in a religious, spiritual fashion where now you do your rituals and it's the winter solstice, it's the autumn equinox. We don't practice, our God does not require that of us. Those are other spirits that require that. Those are those holidays. Those spirits have those particular holidays. The God of Israel does not require that. And in fact, tells us to stay away from divination, to stay away from the idols of the nations. And the idols of the nations come through culture. And that's where we're at. We're at this big conflict of culture, because the world has its culture and it has fun activities and it has festivals and it has plays and movies that are all inspired by pagan principles and pagan gods. Theater came from the Greeks, and the Greeks were largely inspired by their relationships with their gods, their pantheon, and how their pantheon played into their world. And they had morals in their stories and have impacted Western civilization immensely. But as Christians, we don't really have that yet. Yet is the key word, because the Lord told me something very exciting over this past weekend. So where was I? I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but so I went to this fall festival to drop something off for my friend. So it's so nice that she's there volunteering all day, but it's a fall festival celebrating the fall. It's an alternative to Halloween, a repackaging. You just take off the wrapping paper and put on new wrapping paper, but you're involved with pumpkins and scarecrows and harvest and fall decor, and which is the harvest vegetables. They just didn't use pumpkins, they used gourds and squash and all sorts of stuff. So you have the decorations, the decor there. The spirit of Samhain is there, but it's hidden. It's hidden in a nice, shiny bow to make people comfortable with it and to make it so, okay, well, we're at a church event. We're doing this to evangelize to the community. People are going to start coming to our church now, which I can guarantee you, I have never seen that church as so packed as it was for that fall festival. People were coming out of the woodwork. It was hard to find a parking spot. And so now everybody's excited for the fall festival, but where are they? I doubt that they were all there on Sunday to learn about the Lord Jesus Christ and his word. No, because our society is very carnal. That's our default. We want to do the fun things, the exciting things. We want to do family events. We want to do simple things. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do simple things. But you can't put all the weight behind evangelism to, we're going to go out and we're going to do this, because eventually you go out in the world and you become more like the world and you forget what you're really supposed to be like. The church looks exactly like the world does. There's not a big difference between Christians and Christian culture. The Christian culture that has survived, I mean, there is I would say a little bit of a Christian culture in our country, but it's certainly not functioning to the extent. It doesn't have the influence over people like pagan culture has in the world. Our culture, even American culture, is deeply rooted with ancient Greek and Roman traditions that people aren't even aware of. Our society completely revolves around pagan roots. We have the days of our week are named after pagan gods. The months, the way that we do our calendar, I even found ways that we've been influenced by the Greek and Roman culture, the way that we handle law. In the Roman Republic, their form of democracy, their form of government was a republic. The Greeks had democracy. So in the West, we've been heavily influenced by republics and democracy and how the way that they govern their people. Our alphabet, the library, the concept of the library came from ancient Greece. The Olympics that we still watch and participate in, science and mathematics and engineering, and that's not to say that other nations of the world and other cultures, I know the Indians, and by Indians I mean like from India, from Asia, they were very intelligent with their architecture and engineering, but the West here in America and Europe, we were largely influenced by Roman and Greek culture. And so they've heavily influenced our architecture. When we look at and we see columns on a house, or the mythology. I mean, the mythology I read in school was Greek mythology. It's one I remember the most. We didn't talk about Norse mythology or Chinese mythology. It was always Greek mythology. You talked about Zeus, you talked about Poseidon and Hades and Athena, and you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and those were great stories. I read those in 4th grade. But that's not Christian culture. That's not culture of Israel, of God's people. That's culture that's been influenced by pagan tradition. So you see the way that we have plays, Broadway, where I'm in New York here, we have Broadway, we have all of these plays that were influenced. We have Shakespeare and the great Greek tragedians, Sophocles and Euripides, and they wrote plays that were about their gods and how their gods influenced their culture, and they had moral stories, and people still get excited about that today. We're still heavily influenced. by it today. And our use of standardized medicine came from the Greeks. The way that we practice law and medicine, and we have trial by jury, all of these things that people don't even think about, that came from ancient Greek and Roman culture. Our language was heavily influenced. We use a lot of Latin terms today. A lot of the root words of our language came from Latin. So at our very base, we're pagan. And that's just a default of who we are. There's no condemnation in it. There's just an understanding of who we truly are. And that is our fallen soul. And that's why we are spiritual people. So if we don't have a relationship with Jesus, we default and we find other things to have relationships with, because we're not whole. We're half. We're trying to become, we want to be completed. Other spirits want to communicate with us and complete us and give us ideas and move through us and be our muse and bring forth creativity and have a relationship with us. So if we don't have a relationship with Jesus, then these other spirits, we're an empty house. So they try to communicate with us. And once people communicate with them, they become houses for these other spirits and deities. And what they do is, it may not seem like they're doing anything nefarious, but they're having creative thought. They're writing plays, they're writing movies, they're painting, they're sculptors, they're creating things. They're intelligent with their mathematics. They're creating new forms of art, and I was even trying to think of, stuff that exists now that it didn't. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with anime, but it's a form of storytelling. It's Japanese based, but there was a day that anime came into existence. There was a day that a comedy came into existence, and that moment was a spirit using, in communion with a human mind, to write something out or give them the idea, and then they just went forth, and then something was birthed and created from it, and it has impacted culture significantly. And the most exciting thing, one of the most exciting things that the Lord told me this past weekend, is that there will be a new culture coming. And in my mind, it was really hard to comprehend what he told me, because I can't see it yet, because my mind isn't there yet. I can see an idea. I have like the tip of an idea, but I can't see it in its full force quite yet. But it will be coming. There will be a day when Christ in us is bringing forth creative works, and it's going to impact the culture to an extent that whatever we go and do, like if we go to a festival or a religious holiday or something like that, just out and about, that it won't impact Christ in us by participating in it. It will actually strengthen Christ in us and strengthen Christ in other people when they participate in the events. So when you go to a fall festival where the root of it is Samhain, it strengthens your old man and it hinders Christ's growth in you, or the Holy Spirit, whatever you have, because you're participating in something that is ungodly and has negative energy. It's meant to cause destruction in your life. It's meant to create a union with another deity other than Jesus, another voice other than Jesus. So what was very exciting about what the Lord told me is that there is going to be a culture coming, but the creativity has to come from Christ. And that creativity, it takes a long time for Christ to be built up in you to be able to outpour pure creativity. And that's writing and drawing. And I was just thinking about it, and I'm just like grasping at little wisps of an idea that he told me, that there's going to be other modes of creativity that haven't even been discovered yet. Like there's going to be something else, something new other than a tragedy or a comedy or a drama. There's going to be another genre. And all of these are going to be influenced by the creativity of Christ, that the Spirit of Christ is going to be moving through the theater, movies, TV shows, instead of all this occult witchcraft and this satanic occultist religion coming through the TV screen, pouring into everybody in the kids, which is even more deadly because now all these seeds have been planted in this younger generation that Christ is going to come forth and do the same thing that Satan is doing. And so people will be just excited about the story and they won't even realize it, that it'll grip them in such a way. They'll be so excited for the story that they won't realize that what they're being hit with is a spirit of righteousness behind it. And then it'll grow, it'll be planting seeds of righteousness in a lot of people. And it's going to be doing the reverse. So that got me very excited because I've been finding myself, I want culture. I want to experience a culture. I feel like our culture here is completely dying. The American culture, what is it? What is the traditional American culture? American culture used to be, self-governance and independence and respect for hard work and timeliness. And, but now when people think of American, they think of a consumer nation. They think we're just a materialistic society. We're not in shape. We eat trash food filled with chemicals. We're not healthy society. And so what is it? We're in a big cultural war today because the spirit that's living through the culture is an ungodly spirit right now, but it will reverse eventually. It's going to take some time. The Lord's got a lot of work to do. Not a whole lot of laborers, but that's just scriptural. But it will come into play where I can just see it, a play about Moses that's very exciting, and that, Noah, and a spiritual understanding of these characters, because as it stands today, and I'm going to be completely honest, when I go to the book section when I'm in Barnes and Noble, the fantasy section for young adults has exploded from when I was a kid, where when I was guilty, I read Harry Potter. I loved Harry Potter. And what I want a book that is Christian, that excites Christ in me the way that Harry Potter has excited the old man in millions of kids and adults across the world. How many seeds have been planted with that book? And it got people excited for reading again. It totally changed the dynamic of young adult writing. And now the fantasy section and stories about witches and necromancy and all sorts of evil, ungodly activity, spiritual, occult activity has flooded the young adult genre. And when I go over to the Christian section, it's like Amish fiction. To be honest, it seems so boring. It's not exciting. There is esoteric doctrine that is exciting, that excites Christ in you, that gets you thinking about things. And that's what's going to come into play. That's the type of spirit that's the Lord's going to be working with. The stories are going to be esoteric. They're going to be exciting. They're actually going to grip people and grow Christ in them, instead of just being like a fluffy Puritan novel, Quaker, and I hate to be so, I don't want to be judgmental about it, but when you go reading Harry Potter to reading something like that, like, it does not excite you. It doesn't grab you. Christian literature is very subdued. And I was even reading, Ben-Hur, and it's supposed to be this classic Christian literature. It's supposed to be this big, prominent book. And I'm like 6 hours into the 23-hour audiobook, and I'm just bored. And there are some pieces, like, it's the descriptions about stuff. It's that's what kind of bores me. When I get into the dialogue, that's much better. But so far, the story it's not gripping me like other stories have gripped me. And that makes me sad. It makes me, I just know, because I can see it, the Lord showed it to me, that it's going to be very exciting. The culture that is going to come out of a people living righteously is actually going to overtake this culture that has come from ancient pagan practices. And people are going to be so excited about it. Even carnal people, they're going to be excited about it. They're going to love the stories. They're going to be inspired by it. And it's going to trigger creativity in them, even on whatever level that they are. But it's going to be electric. And so that's kind of what I wanted to say at the end of the message, is hope for the future, is that a lot of stuff that happens in society today, us, the people of Israel, we can't partake in because we're not of that nation. That's not, we can't do that because it's not in celebration of our God. We are like this. We're very disciplined and regimented people. And sometimes it's very difficult living in a society when you're going against the grain all the time, but it's not going to last forever. It's just for right now. So Halloween, definitely a demonic holiday. And if anybody's listening to this and is not convicted of that, because the scripture doesn't say anything specific about Halloween, the only thing I have to say in response to that is that there's a lot of stuff that is not mentioned in the Bible, because this is a book. It's limited in the page numbers and what was put in it, but there is new revelation coming forth. Just because this is all in the Bible doesn't mean the Lord stops speaking. This is just the foundation. This is the root. This is supposed to give us the blueprint for how we're supposed to see and discern spirits that are happening today. So this is supposed to just give us a foundation, but we're supposed to go up from the foundation, and we're supposed to continue to seek the Lord's wisdom and discern spirits in today's culture and society, because we don't live in the society that they lived in 2 Samuel. We in Judah and Israel, that was a different time, different age, but the principles and the wisdom still apply. But we're supposed to still be watching and growing. And that's why the new revelation is so important, that the Lord is still speaking and he's still sending down new revelation. He's continuing to build scripture, written scripture. This isn't the only thing that's out there. There is an alternate translation, and Pastor has written that alternate translation. And the revelation is still coming forth. So there is no end to that. There is no end to the revelation. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is not set in stone. There is continuing revelation coming forth. And that's our growth process. We have to continue to discern spirits with the mind of Christ. And we have to know that the Bible is a foundation, and not everything that Jesus said is in the Bible. If these are the only words that Jesus spoke in his entire life, that these are the only highlighted words, then Jesus didn't speak at all in his 33 years. He never said a word other than what's written in here. I mean, come on. The Lord has done so much in this world that you couldn't even write it down in a million Bibles. It's infinite. It's beyond time. It's spiritual. You can't write down everything. It's supposed to be written on our hearts. So, in my opinion, and I believe I have the discernment of the Lord, that Halloween is a demonic holiday, and it's just been repackaged so Christians can still be involved in the world's today's cultures, that they can have an avenue to reach out to people who are either, secular Christians, or as a way to bring people into the church to say, hey, you don't have to totally give up your religions and your fun practices. You could still be Christian and have fun too. And I disagree with that. And I disagree with what Chuck Missler said, that is an alternative to Halloween for Christians. That's not an acceptable alternative. That is Samhain, just repackaged in the same way that the Catholic Church did it. It's not acceptable. And like I said at the beginning, that I don't agree with his thoughts on reincarnation that he said at the end of the video, but the information that he gave throughout the video about Halloween I thought was very informative. So I encourage anybody who's interested to check out that link, and the other links that I provided as well. It's always good to have a foundation and understand why you don't do things, because people will ask you. When I say I don't celebrate Halloween, I think more people are understanding about Halloween than when I say I don't celebrate Christmas and Easter. That gets a lot of questions, but there are a lot of Christians who still celebrate Halloween, and they celebrate it in a way that they're not even aware about. And some of them I know who still understand the demonic aspects of Halloween, still go to Halloween stuff, still carve pumpkins. They haven't quite gotten out of it fully. So I had a couple scriptures as well that I wanted to share. In Psalms, this is King James, Psalms 96, verse 5. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. So the gods that are ruling this world today and have influenced people and cultures